no, it was purely terrible.
Oh, wow.
Because there were people that were
Her fans.
her fans, and I was critiquing certain things that occurred. Yeah, she actually had tagged me on her Instagram that has 7 million followers, and at the time, I think I had like maybe 200,000, so it was just like a wave of random people who didn't even know who I was really, so like they didn't have any kind of way to frame anything I said.
Well, hello, YouTube Power Hour Squad. Erica here with a brand new interview for you. So, for this episode of the podcast, I had the pleasure of speaking with Giulia of Ready to Glare. Now, Giulia has a channel where she talks about some controversial topics, and in this episode, she shares a lot about how she decides on what videos to create and also how she deals with the feedback from her videos. So if you enjoy true crime channels, if you enjoy commentary videos, or even controversial at all channels, then I know you're going to really enjoy this interview with Giulia. And if you're new here, welcome. On this channel, I pull back the curtain to reveal what it's really like to be successful on YouTube. I feature incredible female YouTube content creators where we ask questions to dive deep in regards to what actually goes on this platform. So if that sounds like your jam, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss on any of the interviews I have coming your way. Enjoy this interview. Mwah.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on. And before we kind of dive into everything, why don't you first share with our listeners and viewers what inspired you to first get on YouTube and exactly when that was?
So it was a little bit random. I was in college at the time, and I was taking courses that were supposed to be creative and free, like creative writing. But what ended up happening is that a lot of it, we didn't have much freedom to express ourselves. A lot of the times we had very strict guidelines. So I felt like I wanted a creative outlet where I didn't have anyone telling me you can or can't do thing X or Y. So I made my first video was in 2016. It was a different theme at the time because I really just thought it was going to be a hobby. So I was just talking about wigs and makeup and just very different type of content that I make now. And from there, it slowly evolved, and I started kind of experimenting with other topics that, might be a little intimidating to begin with.
It's so funny because I feel like so many people that I interview and I talk to, so many of them started off like, I just was talking about beauty. And I don't do that at all now, but I just started off talking about beauty.
I think it feels more accessible, because it's not like you have to feel like you're the most informed person in the world. You can just review things as a consumer, which is what I was doing. Whereas with other topics, it can sometimes feel like you need a certain amount of education in the particular field before you kind of quote unquote deserve to talk about it. It's silly, but it feels that way.
Yeah, I think you're right. And so, well, what happened where you started transitioning from beauty to talking about what you're talking about now?
Well, it was a little bit random because when I started talking about beauty and wigs and all of that, I wasn't posting regularly or frequently. It kind of just felt like I was talking to myself. I didn't really conceptualize the idea that other people could see it. So it was just pretty much as if I was looking in a mirror. But after a while, I started to realize that as much as I enjoyed that, that wasn't really my path. I think I maybe was trying to slowly inch in because as much as I enjoy beauty and all that, it's just really not my main interest. And I wanted to talk about things that I wouldn't say are more controversial, but that are more important to me as a person that have to do with morality and ethics and things like that, that I actually have a strong stance on. Whereas with makeup, I don't really think I can have a strong stance on anything.
Yeah. So, what was there any particular video that you created that you were thinking, oh, I'm trying something new, I'm going to do kind of out of my wheelhouse of what I've already done on YouTube?
Yeah, I think there was a true crime case that at the time was still evolving. And it was a case with Michelle Carter, and it was a texting suicide case that was extremely controversial because the public was essentially split between who to quote unquote blame for what occurred. And I remember filming that being very stressed out because it was such a controversial case that I was like, this will probably be the first time I will get very strong, maybe inappropriate reactions as people do on the internet. And I think that was a big turning point for me because that was kind of diving in head first into something completely just new to me.
So where were you at with your channel at that point? Were you at a point where how many subscribers did you have? Were you taking your channel seriously at that point?
At that point, I believe I had just started grad school, so I was significantly more busy. So I was not posting very much. I think I was under 10,000 subscribers. Um, I think I probably had a couple thousand at the time, but it still felt extremely overwhelming because it was that first shift where, if anyone had been watching me regularly, they'd be like, what the hell is going on here?
Mhm.
Like, you were talking about wigs and now you're going into this controversial true crime case. Like, what is going on? So I just was very nervous on how that would be received.
Yeah, and so how was it received?
It wasn't received, it was received better than I expected, actually, just because the people commenting were really open to having a discussion. There was no one that had, kind of jumped the gun and gone full on aggressive with like paragraph comments. And I think at the time, since it was still an evolving case, I didn't really come to super solid conclusions because I said, as the case evolves, as more evidence comes in, I can't really say right now. I will not change my opinion. And I think people resonated with that because
Mhm.
I wasn't just saying, this is the truth, this is the only fact that there is to it. And so I think people were more open with that.
Yeah, and what about numbers wise? Was it received in regards to views? Did it get you more views than you were getting before?
I think so, mainly because I think because the case was, like I said, evolving, it wasn't trending or anything like that, but I think people were really watching it, so it made more people tune in because as it was evolving, I think people wanted to get information that maybe wasn't from mainstream media, just from like an individual who has nothing to gain from it.
Hmm. Yeah. And so at that point, did you make that shift with your content and kind of shy away from makeup?
Yeah, I don't think it was really a conscious decision. Like, it never was kind of like a business plan decision. Like, I sat down and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is the
Hmm.
business model. Like, there was never anything like that, mainly because I didn't even know how YouTube really worked. So, even if I wanted to, it was not possible. But I just think from that point, I felt more comfortable. So, from there on, I started. I think I was like dipping my toes in a pool, and then I just kind of jumped in and said, okay, we can keep going this direction as long as it's interesting to me. So it
Yeah.
wasn't like forced. So I did still do some beauty, I think, after that, but I just didn't feel like doing it anymore after that.
Yeah. So it sounds like you were just kind of more free to do what you actually wanted to do on your channel.
Yeah, yeah, and I think also it took away the kind of fear or like the initial sting of I don't know how this is going to be received, which can be very anxiety inducing to just kind of feel, just having no real concept of how something will pan out.
It's true because it's almost like safer to do something like you said, like beauty or makeup, because so many people are doing it. You don't have to be an expert. You can kind of, be interested in it. But if you actually put something out there that maybe really means something to you or really like you have a strong opinion of, it can be scary because you're throwing it out there for the world and you're like, okay, let's see what happens.
Yeah, and I definitely think that because I wasn't as invested in makeup, it was like my own opinion that it didn't really matter. Like if someone told me my makeup was crap, that's fine. But it's a different thing when it's about your morals or your ethics and
Mhm.
someone says that those are flawed. You receive that very differently. So it's also about, I think, the personal hit I would take if someone came to question my morals over makeup skills or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. And so then how then did your channel progress from there? So you said you're around 10,000 or less than 10,000. You kind of started uploading things you were more interested in, like you said, sharing more of stories that had to do with and revealing your values and morals and all that. And How did it go from there?
So from there, I started uploading regularly, which I think was a really big deal because that's kind of when I decided that it still was a hobby, but I decided that it was a hobby I really wanted to invest in and make a schedule for. So I think that was like the first real, if you want to call it quote unquote, a business move where I said, okay, I'm going to upload Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm going to always upload at the same time so people know, even if they don't get notified, they know something's out there. And from there, from there, my channel grew significantly faster because I think I had kind of tapped into something I was more passionate about, and
Hmm.
then I'd made significant moves to kind of make sure that people who were interested would always be able to see the content. And from there, I really think the regular posting was really the central kind of aspect because it also sends the message that you're taking the content you make more seriously.
Yeah. How often were you uploading prior to that?
Prior to that, there was no real schedule. It was very inconsistent. It was pretty much if I feel like it, I'll upload it. But at the time, I was just so unversed in the YouTube sphere where it was like I'd upload sometimes late at night, which is the last thing you want to do if
Yeah.
if you want people to see your content.
Yeah.
So there was just like no consistency whatsoever. It was just completely random. I'd go sometimes months without putting
Oh,
anything out
wow.
there.
So,
Yeah.
was there anything else going on where you really made that commitment to your YouTube channel?
Yeah, so when I started being consistent, I was in grad school, which was extremely stressful, and I was very busy all the time, needless to say, with like reading and stuff like that. Um, and so I decided, I need something that I can decompress with, but that also I can focus on. For me, it's important to have, well, at the time it was still a hobby, but to have a hobby that has a particular direction. If it doesn't have a
Mm.
direction, I can't focus on it. And here with videos, it's very much something you need to quote unquote complete because you need to do the research, film, edit, and then once you upload, it's like you've finished a task. And so I don't know if it was kind of a way to decompress from all the school things I had to do, but also kind of followed a similar trajectory as like the papers I was writing or something.
Yeah, I see. There's a beginning, middle, and an end there, and also the idea of setting a schedule. When you set a
Yeah.
schedule, you make that commitment to yourself and to your audience. So it's you have to deliver.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that without a schedule, it would also be difficult for me to remain motivated because
Hmm.
it's just kind of like if I don't have to finish this by a certain time, why would I even work on it today? Like it's just so much easier to keep pushing things off or not even doing them at all if there's no commitment made to having a time by when you want it to be done.
I agree. I think it's really important. I know people ask me all the time. It's like, should I have a schedule, set time? I was like, that set schedule is as much for you as it is for your audience because it's forcing
Yeah.
you to make your channel a priority and to actually commit to it. And like you said, kind of follow through and do it.
Yeah, definitely. I think an audience also likes, I know that I personally like knowing exactly when people post so
Yeah,
then
me
I
too.
can tune in without having to look it up and see that they haven't posted and then checking again later. It's just like I think people won't be as motivated to see your content if they continuously have to check to see if it's there rather than just knowing it will be there.
Yeah, and they don't have to hit that notification bell, the whole thing. It's like they know that you're
Yeah.
at, 9 a.m. Friday mornings or whatever, and
Yeah.
they know. So,
Yeah.
was there I know for a lot of channels, there's a lot of times a tipping point, a video that kind of takes off, that kind of jumps their channel up. Did that happen for you?
Not exactly. And by that I mean that I was growing consistently until I got, I think, to 100,000. I was growing quite gradually. And then after I got to 100,000, that's when the ball started rolling faster, but it wasn't exactly a blow up. Like there wasn't a video that I know of at least that really kind of got me a bunch of new subscribers or a bunch of new attention. It was just very gradual. But I do think that majority of YouTubers that I know of after the 100,000 mark, the ball just gets rolling a lot faster. It's getting to the 100,000 that can
Mhm.
be significantly difficult.
Yeah, for sure. And so, with you having a channel that you do talk on sensitive topics, how do you, well, I have a lot of questions about that, but how do you first decide on what you're going to speak about on your channel?
Well, there are a couple of things that I think are the determining factors. The first one, which is the most important one, is that I don't have ambivalence over it. If it's something that I don't really have a stand or a position on, it's not going to happen because it's just if I'm not that invested in the topic, it'll translate and people won't be invested either. So that's the first key thing. Obviously, the second key thing is to see how much information's out there because there have been so many cases that have seemed really interesting, but there'll be maybe a couple of articles and there are only a couple of lines and the information isn't consistent.
Mm.
Even when I'm really interested, that's just something I can't proceed with, which is unfortunate, but that's central. And then I think the other consideration is how significant is it? Because there are there's some topics that I might be very invested in, but I don't find significant in the big picture. Like if I looked back, would I be happy I made that video? I might not mind, but I might not feel like it was necessary to make at that point.
Yeah. Could you go through maybe the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 videos that you uploaded and kind of like the thought process behind, why you uploaded and all that?
Yeah, let me just check because my memory with my videos is all over the place. So, um, yeah, the last few videos, there was one about a controversial film that has come out on Netflix called Cuties. I don't know if you heard about it,
Oh
but
yeah, I saw you. I watched your video about it. Yeah,
oh, yeah, that was truly an unfortunate film, but that was
yeah.
extremely controversial. And I had a lot of people asking me about it, so I actually um, decided to watch the film. And I don't typically do film reviews, but considering the alleged content of that film, it felt like a very necessary thing, not only because it was a big topic of conversation about, how films portray sensitive issues and how that should be done, but also because it just caused such an uproar online that I was curious. Like, even if I wasn't going to film, I was just so curious as to how a film could be that divisive.
Yeah.
Um, so the type of research I did for that was obviously different than typical ones because, it's looking at what the director said, what the movie was like, and, what the plot ended up being like. But the video I filmed after that was a series I have on my channel called Veil Lifted. And that series is by far my most research heavy one. Uh, that's why I make less of those
Mm.
videos because they are very intensive. They usually take hours upon hours to write because you don't want to just use one source. You need multiple sources that are reputable, and then you want to create a narrative that's easy to follow. And this particular narrative was about the Circleville letters, which is a very confusing true crime case. In fact, a lot of the sources was reading had different accounts, which made it all the more confusing and difficult to kind of boil down so it's digestible without having to make, a 1 hour video going
Yeah.
through all these random little twists and turns. And yeah, the last one I posted today was more lighthearted because after all of that, I felt like people needed to, you know,
Breathe.
step back and
Yeah.
maybe have a laugh. Yeah. So I that was this was actually one of the first. It's not exactly a series, but from the beginning of my channel, I did videos kind of making fun of Cosmopolitan as a magazine because
Mm.
they always have these just ridiculous takes that you think, okay, this doesn't sound like real life. And it's just funny to make fun of because it's not at anyone's expense and it's just silliness, kind of like almost like reading a gossip magazine with a
Hmm.
friend and, you just have a laugh and decompress, which is the main point of those, which is why I have them every so often as well.
Yeah. So how long does it take you to put together, say, a video, the cuties one or the circle letters ones?
So the Circleville letter ones, like the one like the veil lifted ones, between everything, I think is usually a 24-hour deal, usually between research, filming, and editing. And editing is heavy on those because it's pretty much a voiceover, so I need to
Hmm.
find images
Images.
and everything, and also compiling evidence if there is pictures of evidence. So those are definitely the ones that take the longest. As for the other ones, like the cuties one, like there are 2 hours that we're just watching the film, but aside from that, usually I have pretty fast turnaround. If like aside from research, it probably can turn it all around within 4 hours. But again, if it's true crime, it's a lot heavier because you don't want mistakes there.
Yeah, because people will call you out on that.
Yeah, and then it's also a question of you don't want to make the victim's story into a mockery by messing it up or
Mm-hmm.
by,
Very
giving the
true.
benefits of the doubt to the wrong people. So
Mm,
it's a
yeah.
responsibility also towards them. Like my viewers aside, I don't want to give them misinformation, but
Yeah.
also the central people in each case, you don't want to make an error
Yeah,
there.
you want to
That's
respect that.
sure.
Yeah, no, definitely, especially some of
Yeah.
those sensitive things that you're talking about. And so, do you do your own editing?
Yes, everything on my channel I do myself. I've always been like that. Um, Also because I feel like if I were to hire someone else, I would always be double checking what they do, obviously. So I
Yeah,
just might as well
do
do
it
it myself.
yourself.
If I have to look over anyway, I might as well, just so I can control all of the parameters and nothing's out of context.
Yeah. And so, with a channel where well, actually, I have a couple questions. So, there's a lot of popularity with true crime and true crime channels out there, but I wouldn't say your channel is that. It's like you have true crime, but you also have it's an interesting if someone were to ask you what is your channel about, what would you say?
Yeah, when people ask me that, I truly always have a bit of an identity crisis because it's like I don't know what to tell you. So I typically say that it's true crime along with social commentary and then popular culture commentary, on other YouTubers, maybe scandals. So usually social commentary is kind of like the biggest umbrella term that is vague enough to kind of encapsulate everything.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And so with a lot of these videos, like social commentary, where you're really giving an opinion, how do you go about that? Because I know for a lot of people, they don't always want to put themselves out there like that. But like you've said, it's like, I mean, and I believe this, people come to YouTube because they want people's authentic feelings and thoughts and opinions. But I'm sure you've dealt with your share of God knows what when when you put out opinions like that. So how do you handle that?
Well, I think one of the first things I had to learn with YouTube, and this was even back when I was doing beauty videos,
Mm-hmm.
there are going to be certain people who will just be mean to be mean. And that's just something that has to unfortunately be accepted. And the difference between someone who's being critical, which is fine, that's complete. I think that's, a great thing to have is critique. But it's a different thing when someone's just being mean, but sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't know, am I really coming off this way, or is this person just trying to, make me doubt myself? So I think learning that has been a very gradual process as well, especially with more controversial opinions. Though I mean, I personally don't think they're controversial, but
Mm-hmm.
um, and I think it's just a question of before I post, if I am okay with what I'm saying, like if I feel right by what I'm saying, then I should be fine. Like you can take other people's opinions into account, but at the end of the day, it's up to me to be able to sleep at night based on what I say.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm sure you get a lot of people that are um, that respect. They might not always agree with you, but they respect the fact that you are authentic and honest with your audience.
Yeah, yeah, I've received quite a few people that, like they'll preface before they message me saying, I don't agree with everything, you've said or all of your opinions, but I respect that you're putting them out there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and at the end of the day, that's I think the best thing you can ask for is just that
Yeah,
people will hear you out.
yeah, I agree. All right, so we are nearing the end of the interview, and at this point, we do the hot seat round. So these are questions that I ask everybody that has come onto the show. The first question is, what is your number one struggle with YouTube?
I think it's knowing what I can put out there and what will actually be seen because we know that the algorithm doesn't particularly favor sensitive content or
Mm-hmm.
non-advertiser friendly content, which can sometimes be demotivating because if there's something I really care about and I want people to see and then it's just going to get lost, you kind of wonder, should I even be making this then?
Yeah. So then how do you decide?
Well, I just post it anyway.
Yeah.
That's how I've done it every single time because
Yeah.
I figure if I'm inclined to film it, then there's a reason for that.
And that goes along with the next question I have is there a particular video or maybe a couple videos you could think of that you were really excited about uploading but didn't do well?
Yeah, I think there are a few of my veil lifted videos that I feel like didn't really get the reaction I expected, mainly because I think the algorithm wasn't super helpful because they are all very sensitive topics. And I feel like that about a lot of my veil lifteds, just because it's also like some people don't want to commit to a 20-minute video as well. Like all of these are typically longer than my average.
Mm.
So it's a question of sometimes people will set it aside and watch it maybe later or another day when they have the time to commit to it.
Yeah. Are there any videos that, or any one particular video that you uploaded that you're surprised as to how well it did?
Yes, I had I think two or three, I can't remember. It was kind of like a mini series of videos that were discussing the controversies surrounding Kat Von D that I was surprised people actually were interested in because I just felt like it's been so discussed that I wasn't really sure if anyone would, want another take.
Yeah. Well, apparently they did. You said you did a couple of videos on that?
Yeah, I also got a reaction from her and her husband, so it
Oh.
definitely turned into something larger than expected.
Oh, wow. So did that
Yeah.
did that bring some good exposure or bad exposure to your channel?
Oh no, it was purely terrible.
Oh, wow.
Because there were people that were
Her
her
fans.
her fans, and I was critiquing certain things that occurred. Yeah, she actually had tagged me on her Instagram that has 7 million followers, and at the time I think I had like maybe 200,000, so it was just like a wave of random people who didn't even know who I was really, so like they didn't have any kind of way to frame anything I said.
How long did that
So
last
that was
for?
Not too long. I think they got over it after a couple of days, mainly because I think that what I presented, in my opinion, was valid and was all based on public articles. Like none of it was me, fishing for gossip from someone. It was all public articles. A lot of them were interviews with herself and her husband, so everything was in context. So I don't think they could really find too much to be angry about aside from disagreeing.
So what did she do? Did she call you out on her Instagram or something?
Yeah, those were some of the most anxiety-induced days I remember having
Oh
in my
my
entire
gosh.
life. Yeah, so she happened to tag me on her Instagram, like on a post, just saying that I should be ashamed of myself for reporting on public articles. So it was very confusing to me, and it was months after I posted too. So I was like, why
Oh.
why is this coming up now? Um, and then her husband happened to post a screenshot where he called me a couple of not very great names. And so people came from that as well. And yeah, it was just extremely messy. Yeah, it was just very mismanaged.
Wow. I mean, there's been a lot of people to comment on Kat Von D. So I'm wondering if she does that for everybody who just does a video about her, or if you were.
I I personally don't know what the situation was, but I just remember being frustrated because she tagged me and then limited her comments
Oh.
on the post. So I couldn't even respond or say anything, which kind of felt like a little bit like being thrown under the bus because people I don't think were even watching my videos and were immediately just going to my Instagram to just, because I was tagged, so it was easy. So it seemed a bit like a misunderstanding at the time, at least for the followers that were coming to me.
So was there any closure there? Did you ever communicate with her directly, or did it just kind of die out?
It kind of died out. I had considered speaking to her directly, but I also figured if someone's going to tag me instead of just messaging me directly, I don't really think the communication would be worthwhile. I just don't think she wanted me to discuss anything. It's just like her opinion was made, so I
Hmm.
just figured I wouldn't, bother her with that because it seemed pretty much like an open and closed case in their books.
Yeah. And did they come over to your video as well on YouTube?
Not that I know of.
Mm.
I do know that her husband went relatively out of his way to, like DM people who were my followers to kind of try and prove that I had made things up, which I only read articles that were publicly posted. So I don't know how I could make things up. Everything was text on screen, everything was linked. So, I mean, at that point, I really just thought that if any of those articles were misleading, that they should reach out to their publicists or something to correct whatever journalist said something misleading, because that's
Mm-hmm.
really
That's the
what I
source.
think they were mad about. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's what they were mad about, but they put it on me as if, I published it or something.
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, don't kill the messenger.
Yeah, I was just surprised that they didn't, reach out to whoever was in charge of whatever interviews they did to correct that, because it's not only me who's going to have that opinion, it's everyone
Who
who
reads
reads
it?
that. And one of those interviews I think was like a sister company of Vice. So it's not like a small little publication no one's heard of. So it was a very interesting time. I think that was the first time I was exposed to how YouTube can work, because you kind of assume that no one's ever really going to see, like, the subject of your video is never going to see it, and that was a big a big shock to me at the time.
Yeah, that's crazy. Okay, what is your favorite video that you've done on your channel?
I think it was my I think it was my first veil lifted, and let me just check very briefly. Yes, it was my first veil lifted, and it was on Elizabeth Holmes. I don't know if you are familiar with her, but
Let me
she
so
pretty much
familiar.
started a company and fooled the world by thinking she could use a drop of blood and pretty
Oh,
much tell you what you
the
might have, or
Theranos.
what diseases.
Is that the Theranos?
Yes, her.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I read that book.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so that was my first, I think it was the first or one of my first veil lifteds, and that was really interesting because I was extremely just mystified by how someone kind of
I
fools
know.
the world into thinking they have some kind of ability they don't. Surreal.
She got pretty far too. I mean, she fooled a lot of people.
Yeah, it's like nobody checked her notes. They were just like, this sounds good. Case closed. Take all my money.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was truly, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, that was a fascinating story. Um, what is the biggest opportunity you got as a result of your YouTube channel?
Um, I think it's kind of funny because I think in one way, one of the best opportunities was not really even necessarily related to business, but there are a lot of channels that I watched before I even started my channel that I now have interacted with. Like, some of them I am friends with now, and I think that that's really cool and surreal because, like, until not so long ago, it was just me watching them and having like this distinct feeling of I'll never have a conversation with this person. And then luckily, like, some of them may have come across me, and then we've talked, and that's been really cool, kind of surreal, honestly.
Yeah, it is cool. I mean, I mean, there's definitely a community in there of YouTubers, and because it's such a unique experience, and it can be a lonely experience, and knowing other creators, I would imagine, is very helpful.
Yeah, and ironically, I met my best friend via the fact that she'd seen a video, and then we started talking, and now she's my best friend. So, like, there are a lot of things that I think worked out well in the sense of coming into contact with people who share passions or opinions,
Hmm.
and we can discuss those. And on top of that, them being people I've admired for years is really, it's just not an explainable feeling.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Um, if you were to start over right now, what would you do differently?
I think I probably would have just started a more structured kind of content earlier. And at the time, I didn't even know how, like, the monetary side of it worked. I didn't know, like, what being suitable for ads was, what works best, how to get sponsorships, all of these things that nobody really explains to you. Um, and it's actually funny because a lot of content creators and myself have discussed this, how a lot of the times it's actually another content creator who will tell you, hey, did you hear about this? Because if you do thing X in the first few minutes of your video, you'll get demonetized, you know? So it's like a lot of these things that I've only learned via other people because YouTube doesn't really tell you how to do YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, especially when it comes to those monetization things, because I think it's just figuring it out, and sharing that information. Because, yeah, it's hard. And I would imagine for you, do you? I'm sure this is something you deal with time and time again. Is YouTube the word is always so hard to say, demonetizing your content?
Yeah, I actually I deal with it quite a bit, but I don't think as much as people think, mainly because I think I drop a couple of bad words here and there, granted, but I think that I've not cleaned up my content because it's very much the same as before, but I think maybe because of the delivery, it's deemed as, less inappropriate than, someone who might speak differently or who might seem like they're just saying things without purpose. I don't know, but luckily it hasn't been too bad. But there's some videos where I just know it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna get monetized, and that's something I think you need to make your peace with if you're making this type of content because
Yeah,
you can only fight back to a certain degree.
yeah. What percentage of your videos would you say get demonetized? That actually end up
Um,
demonetized? Because now you can go in and have them review it, but
yeah, so I was actually gonna say something about that a lot of them have like the get demonetized immediately, and then when someone reviews them, then they're fine. As of right now, I'd say maybe 20% stay
mm,
demonetized. So it's definitely not a bad percentage considering some other people I know that really get hit with it, but it's just extremely unpredictable because some of the demonetized videos are the ones about Cosmopolitan, which you'd think are,
yeah.
relatively advertiser friendly compared to all of my other content. So I think it's just a trial and error, really.
What percentage of them gets demonetized right out of the gate?
Oh, I'd say
Mm,
almost half immediately, and then I'll ask for
the
a review,
review.
and then yeah, but I'd say almost half, mainly because probably my track record, they just see that a lot of the themes are not advertiser friendly, and they just kind of
Hmm.
assume like, here's another one.
Yeah, and then you lose out on those first few days of AdSense revenue.
Well, yeah, and then being demonetized also affects your standing with the algorithm, so it's pushed less, so the views are less, and then that affects potential sponsors. It's all
Hmm.
a domino effect there, really.
Yeah, yeah. Um, what? Let me see. What is your superpower that you think has led to your success on YouTube?
I think my work ethic for sure is very central. Just because I think that that's something that school prepared me with as well. That I when I make something like a schedule or a commitment, it has to happen, and it doesn't really matter how long it takes. It's gonna happen, and I think that's really what made the difference because until I was posting consistently, like I said, I wasn't really seeing massive results. And then once I decided, okay, we have to figure out a way to do this on a schedule, that's really when things started to really work.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. And then last question, what is the number one piece of advice that you would give somebody who is looking to start on YouTube, or they have a channel but they would like to grow it bigger?
I think that the most important thing to know when you start a channel or if you already have one and want to go in a different kind of zone in terms of topics is just understanding how you best can get your idea across because there's certain people, for example, that do better with voiceovers because they don't want to be seen on camera because if they're seen on camera, they might not enunciate properly or there are a lot of factors that affect how you come off and how you make your arguments. So, figuring out if you want to just have text on screen or if you want to be in the video, just like the format of everything is so important because I think that's how people will get their concept of you, right? And you don't want people to get the wrong idea, so you have to really analyze how do I put myself out there in a way that actually represents who I am.
Yeah, and how would you say you do that for yourself?
I think it was a lot of trial and error, and it was just a lot of it really comes with time because nobody is automatically comfortable sitting in front of a camera just talking to it. It can feel ridiculous at
Mhm.
first. I know it felt ridiculous for me because I was like, no one's watching this. Like, why am I filming this? But as time went on, I think that even just doing small things that would seem silly or unimportant made a big difference. Like getting a background that I liked made me feel more comfortable because, you would just wouldn't see a white wall. And that made me feel more like I was doing something and investing in it. And those little changes make a big difference in terms of your confidence, right? Because if you're sitting in front of a pile of like dirty clothes, no one's going to feel like
Mhm.
um, like their best kind of source of entertainment or information.
I think that's so true. So much of it comes down to how you're feeling about yourself, even in that moment. Some people can just have an off day and then they're like, oh, I just don't like even how I came across on camera. I wasn't my best self. I wasn't feeling confident. So it's like, even like what you said, like creating an environment so that you are the best version of yourself whenever you hit record.
Yeah, and especially because you're gonna see and hear yourself a lot in editing.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, it's brutal. It's very difficult to edit something where you think you look bad or where you don't feel like you're really kind of exuding the type of vibe you want.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, well, Julia, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast and sharing your experiences on YouTube. For people that are listening or watching that aren't familiar with you and your content, where can they find you?
So I'm on YouTube under the handle Ready to Glare, and it's the same on Instagram as well. And I'm also on Twitter, and that's just Ready to Glare, and then the initials of YouTube YT.
Awesome. And I'm going to have all the links in the description below. And if you're watching this on YouTube, comment, let us know what your biggest takeaway was from this interview. Thank you so much, Julia.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.